In this session, let's start looking at the operations phase of the project, wherein one of the most important aspect in the operations is how do I handle the various revenues and expenses. So for that, I need to have various assumptions on what all are the various sources of revenue, right? Either in some cases it could be a part of the contract document itself, or in some cases I may have to think of the various revenue generating mechanisms out of this project, because as a part of as a part of the concession agreement also, all these various sources of revenues can very well be highlighted, and at the same time you have your own set of assumptions for the ongoing maintenance expenses, because whenever you are giving it as an operations contract to your operations contract agency, you would be understanding what are your expenses that you are incurring on a regular basis. Along with them, though in this session we'll deal with these two aspects, but we would also have a separate workouts, one for depreciations, because that's one important aspect that goes into our profit and loss statements and all these things. So we'll have a mechanism to handle the depreciation, we'll have a mechanism to handle the tax, how much tax you have to pay, and we'll also have we already looked at the mechanism with respect to the leasing, the lease rentals for the entire period, and we will also deal with the interest costs, right? We have only looked at the interest during the construction period till now, the interest and probably the principal repayment part. So this kind of a separate workout we will do, and after doing all these things we will carry this entire knowledge into a full-fledged profit and loss statement, a balance sheet, a cash flow statement, from where we would also get into determining the value of the project or the returns of the project. So to start with, we will look at the revenues and the expenses, which are primarily the real business part, the operating revenue. Otherwise, I would also call it as operating revenue as well as operating expenses. So these are the two things we will look at, and of course, the various sources of revenue can in themselves be very complicated, right? Probably if I am thinking of let's look at some of the sources of revenue that the case was highlighting. If I look at here, yeah, parking revenues 2.5 crores at the current utilization levels. But of course, what we are saying is, if the utilization level is something more or something less, we should either increase or decrease the revenue. But whatever it is, the parking revenue we are saying at around 2.5 crores, but that itself, arriving at that number itself could have been a big exercise, in the sense the analysis could have gone like, okay, what is the area that is earmarked for parking, and in that parking area how many cars can be parked, what could be the occupancy on a daily basis, how much charge should I do for the car parking fee, and how many such cars, or what is the turnaround of such cars on a daily basis. All these input could have gone in to arrive at that 2.5 crores itself. So assuming all that background work has been done, I'm starting at this layer. saying these are the various sources of revenue as of the current prices. As of the current prices, I am saying these are the sources of revenue under the assumption of 100% utilization. So, in this business model, we are expecting that the revenues will come from parking, bus terminal, budget hotel, health center, right, bank extension counters. From all these things, we are expecting that the revenues will get generated, and under the assumption of 100% utilization. So I should be able to forecast these revenues for the entire operations period. I should not look out for the construction period here, because I will not get any revenues during the construction period. But this 2.5 is for the current year as per the current prices, but we are making an assumption that my revenues will be growing at the rate of 7% every year. So I can very well bring in even that kind of increment into my revenues for each of the years. So what I'll do is I'll create another sheet targeting revenues and expenses. Probably otherwise you can very well handle these two things separately also in two different sheets, especially if there is a lot of complication going in. But the one thing I suggest you to go ahead with is, or practice is, all the calculations should come from your assumption sheet itself. Even if you are taking some additional time in terms of your modeling exercise, everything has to come from the assumption sheet. Anything whichever you are changing, that has to come from the assumption sheet itself. Okay, again, the first two lines I'll keep them as it is from any of these sheets. If this value is equal to blank, I will leave this as blank, otherwise fill it with this value. So the same logic, I'll extend it to the second line, and probably I would also take it up to AZ. Right, I will take it up to AZ, the same logic, fair enough. Now, so which means up to here, this is the construction and this is the operation space. Now, let's look at the revenue side before we get into the expenses part. The revenues, we are saying these are the various sources of revenue. So probably, because this is exactly a simple list, I will simply copy it. Probably you don't need to, there is nothing with respect to calculations for them, so that's the reason I am taking the revenues list as it is. But wherever the calculations are involved, I would try to go ahead with linking it with the assumption sheet itself without doing any kind of manual copy paste kind of exercise. So in as far as the parking revenues are concerned, what is that I am saying? I'll pull out, these are the revenues from parking, but this is in the current year, and so year on year they are going to grow up by 7%. So how do I build that logic? If this number is equal to 1, means the first year, take that revenue as the exact value itself. Now let's see. If the B1, I think I should put a dollar. I have to freeze it. Right? It can become C1, D1, whatever, but the 1 has to be frozen. If B1 equal to 1, take it as this. Otherwise, multiply the previous revenue, whatever is there, multiply the previous cell's revenue, whatever is there, with 1 plus whatever is the revenue growth rate. Means you increment it by your assumptions of the increment on revenue. If this is equal to 1, keep it as the revenue from there. Yeah, and again the revenue from there, probably I'll remove the dollar here, because when I drag it down for the other sources of revenue, I should get, instead of B67 of the assumption, it should pull out the B68, B69 and something like that. So that's one more thing. And even the utilization factor, the utilization actual divided by, right, so I will also consider the assumption B67 multiplied by the actual utilization. Here also I'll put a dollar for D67 and divided by the utilization percentage. Here also I'll put a dollar for C, right? Alright, now let me see with respect to the previous value. But if I am taking with respect to the previous value, let's see how this is going to shape up. Or the better way is, instead of handling it as, or probably let me do it slightly better. We can, the calculation wise, all we are saying is the parking revenue. Okay, the parking revenue, I'll put a dollar here, multiplied by the actual utilization, I'll put a dollar here, and multiplied by, divided by the utilization percentage, I'll put a dollar here. But this I can increment it by revenues 1 lesser than, we'll make one general formula instead of putting so many ifs. I'll put it as 1 plus the revenue growth rate, whatever is it, increment in the revenues, raise it to the power of year number minus 1. Means year 1 this is the same value. For year 2 it will be grown by 7%, year 3 it will be grown by 7% of 7% twice. So like that we can directly do an auto increment. So we'll use this 1 plus the revenue growth rate to the power, I'll take this as year number, wherein I can freeze the $1 here minus 1. If I do this exercise, what is coming out? Yeah, for the first year the parking revenue, let's say, is coming out to be something like this. Just looking at it for a few years, yeah, it is getting incremented in this way. But now a few things that we require, this is applicable only for the operations period. So I could put one simple logic here saying, if this, so or probably this, if this is equal to O, only do that work. If this is equal to O, then only do that work, otherwise replace it with a blank. So because of this, what is going to happen, and what I could also do is this 2, I will freeze it with a $. Now if I drag this piece across, right, let's see, up to AZ, if I am dragging this piece across, I know that these are the revenues until the 33rd year, starting from the 3rd year onwards. Now it might very well be possible that I can quite comfortably drag this formula till the last and even towards the right, I can drag this formula till the last and towards the right, because we have taken the right mix of the Excel formula across. So these are what are the various sources of revenues for us during this entire period. These are the various sources of revenues that our business is generating during this entire period, and if required, again we can do that basic formatting exercise of the entire thing being handled in terms of 2 digits after the decimal point. So probably from here I can talk about the total revenues, right? Again the same logic I can put. If this is equal to O, if this is during the operations period only, do the summation of all these revenues, otherwise leave it as blank. So with that calculation, what may come out is, even if I am extending it across, even when I am doing it until here, it is very well coming out that we are talking about the revenues only during the operations phase of the project. No other phase. We are getting the revenues only during the operations phase of the project. Now the same way we can get into the expenses part, right? I can get into the handling of the expenses. Even the same scenario, we should look out in terms of the expenses. We are arriving at these being the various headings for our expenses to start with, right? These are our various headers for expenses, but yeah, some of these expenses have a slightly different behavior compared to our revenues, so we have to be slightly careful in terms of handling these numbers, right? Operations wise, these are the expenses for us. So wherever we are talking about, okay, we'll go item by item. The security cost initially is 30 lakh per year, or probably the better way would have been, I'll change this here, instead of 30 lakhs I'll make it as 0.3 crores. So I'll do the format change here, directly making it as, instead of lakh per year, probably I'll make it crores. And also instead of having this kind of a basis, we will take it as we will take this as I'll take it 0.00 crores per year. So I'll make it as 2 digits after the decimal point. So this comes out as 0.30 crore per year. The same logic probably I will extend even to these things. So instead of 35 crores, I'll make it as 0.35 crores per year, and for this also I'll make 0.25 crores per year. Otherwise, we may have to handle this at the formula layer on the expenses sheet. You can do it either way. Okay, the security cost right now is 0.3 crores per year, but it is incrementing probably wherever we are taking a direct. See, in expenses we have two major categories. One is where the amount is directly mentioned like this, which are these security costs, water bill, power bill. Whereas some of the things which are directly based on their head revenue. So wherever we are linking them with their head revenue, we don't need to use inflation or any other cost increment mechanism, because as the revenue is increasing, the cost also will increase. But in some cases, we have taken the value in rupees, or in crores of rupees, wherein it's not linked with the revenue. In those cases, I will increment those costs at the rate of inflation itself. So this 0.3 crores, the same logic we have used here, I should replicate for those three elements also. Right? So what I'll do the copy of this formula and paste it here with a small modification. I don't have this utilization factors, so I'll not just consider these two utilization factors here, but apart from that, I think the formula looks the same. So if I try dragging it, I'll come to know. Yes, I am able to see, instead of growing it at assumption B80, no, this is where the numbers are different. So probably let's handle this again. What is my security cost here? This is the security cost, right? In this, I'm multiplying this security cost. Probably I have to block out my, or I'll put a dollar here. The security cost multiplied by 1 plus inflation rate. What is the inflation rate here? 5%. So I'll multiply this with the inflation rate to the power the year number minus 1. So I'll take this as this particular number minus 1. But this entire formula is applicable only when this is a operations period. So when this is equal to O, only then this entire formula is applicable. Otherwise, I may have to replace it with a blank. But the same formula probably I can use for water bill and power bill. So to make sure that I am using it for those two, all I can put is, I'll put this appropriate dollars here. Instead of B78, I'll remove the dollar before the 78 so that I can reuse it. Assumption B17 remains the same, and here also B1, I'll block the row number 1 by putting the dollar. So now I think the same formula can very well be replicated for the water bill as well as power bill, but before that we can quickly check out how it is moving with respect to the security costs. Is it getting reflected correctly until the operations period? And the same thing probably if I am carrying it to the water bill as well as to the power bill, it has to work. So these are the costs that are associated with the security, the water bill and the power bill during the operations period. Then we are talking about the remaining things, which are the bus terminal areas and the other aspects, wherein for the first 4 of them we have bundled it as some percentage of the head revenue. So the bus terminal area cost for me is straightforward. Whatever is the bus terminal area revenue multiplied by the head revenue, percentage of the head revenue for this bus terminal area. But the scenario is, even this is applicable only for the operations period. So all I could handle is, if this is equal to operations, then do this calculation. Otherwise keep it as blank. So what is coming out? The operations cost For the bus terminal area, it's coming out quite comfortable. These are the operations costs for the bus terminal area for the entire period. So these are the costs for my bus terminal area. Same way I can think of parking. Whatever is the head revenue, parking revenue is going to be this multiplied by whatever is the 5% of the head cost. So again the same logic can very well be used, right? We can drag all of these things at one go. If this is equal to operations, only then do this exercise, otherwise leave it as blank. That is with respect to the parking. Even for the office space, PHC, banks and support, all of them we can look at. So I'll take the summation of office space, PHC, bank and support. All these costs multiplied by whatever is the maintenance corresponding to it, 5% of the head revenue, right? 5% of the head revenue, the summation of all these numbers. So here also I can put the same logic. Only if the period is operations, I will consider that. Otherwise, I'll replace this with a blank. Same way, I can use it for a budget hotel. Whatever is the budget revenue from the budget hotel, I multiply it with the maintenance expenses for the budget hotel. Same logic, right? The maintenance expenses for the budget hotel. Again, if this is equal to operations, handle this calculation, otherwise leave it as blank. This is one more aspect. And the same logic goes with the AMC of basic infrastructure and lighting, 5% of the total revenue, not the head revenue. Means I will take this total revenues column. So this is my total revenues. I am multiplying that, let's say, with the AMC of the basic infrastructure and lighting. Again, here also I can put up the same assumption. So, I mean, you can very well work out with your businesses sources of revenues and expenses, which has to be done in detail. But with this case, I am making it as a simplified version of the same. Now, all I could do is I can drag all these things till the last up to my AZ column, and I could clearly expect that all these costs are updated accordingly. Now I can go ahead very well saying that the total expenses during this period, I can very well highlight total expenses during the period, wherein I'll put a simple formula saying if this is an operations period, means if this value is equal to O, compute the expenses, wherein do the summation of all these expenses, otherwise leave it as blank. So this is how my operations expenses also will come out for each of the periods during the maintenance period. Right, during the, I can take a bolding of this. So these are my expenses during the maintenance or operations phase, and formatting wise I can very well look at. So from the operations or from the real business operations, I am expecting that right from the year 3, when the operations period is starting, These are the various sources of revenue for me, and these are the various sources of expenses. So probably the difference between these two is what is contributing to the profits every year. Only the operating profits, because we'll be if I'm making my overall profit and loss statement, I would also be looking at the concepts like depreciations and various other aspects. So just at a very broad level, looking at the business level revenues and expenses, or the operating phase, operating revenues and operating expenses, these are the typical numbers. Now the same way we would try to create for the depreciation, we'll try to have a separate sheet for handling the depreciation, for handling the tax, and for even we'll complete the interest and the principal repayment portion. All these separate entities before we start getting into the process of preparation of our financial statements. Alright. I hope you got the usage of various Excel formulas to handle the operations wise revenues and expenses. In case you have any further queries regarding the same, you can get back to me by giving me a call on the number that I have given there, 98480-12123. You can even drop in an email at vamsidhar@pacegurus.com. Thanks a lot for listening to this session. Thank you very much.